everyone. They are currently passing around kind of a written summary of what I'm going to go over here on the screen, so please feel free to read or pay attention. Read ahead if you want. But I know you've already got to the spoiler alert, so we'll just start there. This is the 2023, it's not the budget review, it's actually the rate increase review. That's what I get for doing this at night late. And we're going to go over the July 1st rate increase and why. So to start with, the July 1st rate increase is going to come in at 6.6%. Currently, the consumer price index year-over-year change is 4.6% for the Class A all items index. And we are taking the total of 6.6%. Please understand, we have multiple different versions of contracts throughout this campus. So 6.6% is what we are taking, but every rate increase is going to be dictated. I'm just gonna wait for the door to close. So each rate increase for every resident is going to be dictated by your contract verbiage. Some cap out at 5%, some only allow us to take the CPI, and some allow the CPI plus 2%. The timing of your rate increase is going to be September, similar to prior years, which means that the notice will be in your in-house mailboxes by tomorrow. If you look at the graph here, this kind of shows a historical look of what Southport Square has done with regards to rate increases. The very first line in the graph of the bar graph is the CPI plus 2%. And the second line in the bar graph, or the orange graph bar, is what was actually taken by Southport Square. So if you will see in prior years, this is the first year aside from 2020, where we only took 2%, where we are taking the maximum allotted rate increase that we can. If you look at the gray line that finds its way through that graph, that is the Social Security COLA that has happened every year. So directionally, if you look at what Southport Square has done with their rate increases, it has followed, not dollar for dollar, but directionally has followed the Social Security COLA. The difference between Southport Square's rate increase and the cost of living for Social Security is that happens in January of the following year, and we are taking the increase September of the year prior. And so knowing that it's directionally accurate kind of shows you that we really are only taking that cost of living increase each year at Southport Square. Our key drivers to the rate increase: labor and wages. That is going to continue to be one of our key drivers for the next few years. Again, there is direct legislation that is stating that we have to increase our minimum wage to $15 by 2026. As a result of that, we can't just take up our entry-level employees to 15 that we're making less than 15. We have to look at everyone on the campus, because what it creates is wage pressures and wage compression with all of the associates here. So every single year since 2020, when this legislation was enacted, we are having to look at the salaries of everyone throughout the campus and make adjustments accordingly. As much as we would like to stay at the minimum wage as stated per legislation each year, that is not feasible to recruiting and retaining quality employees. So aside from looking at that direct legislation, we have to look at our external market pressures. And I've heard from many, many residents, what are you gonna do when Sunseeker opens up? What we're probably gonna do is lose some employees. But what we are doing is heavily recruiting. We now run recruiting classes every single week. The last 3 have had more than 10 people in each class, which means that we are actively hiring 40 to 50 associates every single month. We also have pressures on non-clinical positions. So we also have a lot of restaurants opening up in Charlotte County, a lot of other businesses opening up in Charlotte County that are targeting our associates. because Charlotte County has one of the lowest unemployment rates. It's under 3%, which is lower than the 5% that it's been historically. And the people moving to Charlotte County, the average age of Charlotte County residents is 62. So we are not driving people into Charlotte County that are ready and willing to work. We're driving people to Charlotte County that want to retire here because it's a beautiful community. Which means that our labor pool is being shared amongst all the businesses in Charlotte County. A lot of people that live here commute out to Sarasota, to Fort Myers for jobs because their cost of living is higher, so their rates are higher. And the commute is not out of the question. So we are trying to attract that Charlotte County resident, that Lee County resident, that Sarasota County resident to commute to Charlotte County to work at Southport Square. And then last but not least, we have nurses. There is a nationwide nursing shortage. And the nursing shortage, unfortunately, is not just a shortage unique to Southport Square. And it's gonna grow right now exponentially every year with the amount of people that are currently aging in the United States. So we have to remain competitive to attract quality nursing. One of our main goals right now is to stop using agency nurses. And while we are still using agency nurses, we are actively recruiting heavily, looking at wages, and looking at Southport Square to be the employer of choice to attract nurses to our healthcare center each and every day. On top of that, we have non-wage expenses. So our food, our supplies, and our maintenance costs are still going up. As much as you hear in the news nowadays about inflation going down, it's going down from the top level that it hit back in 2020, so it is nowhere near what we used to pay back in 2018 or 2019, and they're still increasing today. We also have ramifications of property tax increases and insurance increases. Please note that those insurance increases are not due to Hurricane Ian restoration. That is not included when we're looking at our year-over-year change in our costs. So those are our insurance coverage for our buildings, for our property, but not related to deductibles or restoration costs paid for Hurricane Ian. And for those of you that, again, that have heard the news, a lot of insurance companies are pulling out of the state of Florida, and so a lot of the claims from Hurricane Ian are now the responsibility of the state of Florida, and as such, insurance costs have risen to account for and help pay for those people whose insurance companies left. That is through no fault of our own, no fault of their own, but unfortunately is how they are handling those increased costs. So first, let's look at wages, and this is a graph I have used since the legislation went into effect. If you look solely at the impact of our wages, and we did have staff, and we do have staff that were making $8 an hour in 2020. So in 2023, the impact alone of just moving people up, according to estimates, is going to be a 9.1% change in our salaries. So gone are the days where salaries move up 3% because everybody's gonna get a raise every year. We are having to look at this legislation, we are having to look at our competitors, we are having to look at our staffing and make wage changes on a daily basis. So the minimum wage laws estimate was to impact 2023 solely by 9.1%. Now it's going to go down as the years go by, and the reason why it's going to go down is because when you take a percentage of a higher dollar and it's the same percentage, your percentage goes down. Because from 2020 to 2021, the rates rose $1.35, and then from there it's $1 a year until 2026. So you've heard me say wage pressures and competition. This is a slide just demonstrating the new businesses that are under permitting, under construction, or have been completed in Charlotte County. Sunseekers being one of the largest, so they're down here on the bottom. We have new restaurants that have opened up, such as Cheddar's, which is over off of Murdoch. We have a new FedEx distribution center. There's going to be a new freestanding emergency room. They're going to be looking at nursing. We have new car dealerships, other new restaurants that are scheduled to hit Charlotte County within the next couple of years. And then on top of that, Charlotte County Commissioners just approved a brand new downtown area off of Olean, where they're going to be building apartments, hotels, and more commercial establishments. That's a few years out, but it is, again, something we're going to be looking at for the next few years because they are our new sun seekers. And so, you know, there's always going to be a sun seekers on the horizon, maybe not as large in scope, but Charlotte County is getting ready to build and grow and expand. So what does this do to our wages? The first column is what we paid last year. The second column is what we're paying this year. And if you look, our wages are going up an average of 11.2%. Now that's just not salary, so all of food services did not get a 21.6% raise. I can assure you that they'd be happy, but that did not happen. But if you notice, our dining rooms are open again. We have more servers, we have more cooks, we have more utility workers. We are back to our staffing levels prior to 2020, which took us a long time to get there, but it's an increase of a lot of employees. So that 21.6% are the employees needed to run Southport, plus the wage adjustments that needed to be made to keep up with the legislation and to keep up with being competitive. Same with environmental services, 20.8% increase year over year. Again, our staffing levels are higher than they've ever been. I think we're down to 2 open positions, where in years prior we had 8 to 10 open positions. So our recruiting has been a success, but it leads to higher wages, and it leads to wage adjustments having a higher impact. And then on top of that, we have our IHS wages that went up 21.7. So I'm going through the 3 largest increases that we've seen. So with IHS, the good news about the wage increases is their wages are solely tied to the number of hours that we service our residents. So that just means that more people are taking the services. So aside from wage adjustments, that increase again is increase in personnel as well. But in total, we've gone up year to date, so through May, $846,000 in salary. That's quite a lot, being it's only 5 months, and it's a 5-month comparative to a 5-month comparative, or 11.2%. When we look at our controllable costs, so these are the things that we have direct control over, we've gone up 10.8% year over year. Our largest drivers, being resident services from a percentage-wise, but from a dollar-wise, not material. But our food services is up $162,000 year over year. That's food costs and supply costs for our food services. Our plant is up $134,000 year over year, or 23.3%. That's everything that we need to spend to keep Southport Square running that is not related to Hurricane Ian. So that's just our day-to-day operations. And then the bottom line is actually the healthcare center. I reversed those 2. Our healthcare center costs are up by $60,000. But one of the things I want you to understand when we look at our rate increase and to our residents, we take out those healthcare ancillaries. So that's their pharmacy costs, medical equipment costs. The reason why we take them out, we do not include them when we look at what the inflationary pressure is or the year-over-year cost statistics are for Southport Square, is because those are reimbursed by insurance companies and Medicare. So that cost is not passed through in the form of looking at your rate increase year over year. Our non-controllable expenses. So this is kind of where we see the biggest one. These numbers here don't match the numbers on your handout. The reason being is in insurance and taxes, and I did want to show this, is we had a settlement in May for a case, and so that's what's driving up 400 of that $500,000 miss. But we still went up over $100,000 year over year, which is quite significant. And that's directly related to our property taxes for 2024 that we will have to pay at the end of the year, and for our insurance costs that have gone up. not related to settlements. Management fees are a function of revenue, so those don't get passed through as well. They're going up because we are performing better. So when we're looking at your rate increase, and we're looking at your wage increase, this is another item that we do exclude. Because your rate increase is supposed to handle the day-to-day operations of Southport Square. And what does it mean, and how does it relate to you? So this answers the question here. This is how it relates to you. If we look at, Chester and I had talked about this prior, but the concern was we're 66, 67% occupied, which means that you are bearing a higher rate increase to fund the operations of Southport Square. The purpose of this chart is to show to you that we look at your occupancy and how it impacts our costs and how that flows through to your bottom line. So if you look at our food costs year over year, our food costs have gone up 19.2% on a per resident per day basis. So again, that applies to one resident. So if somebody's not here, we're not counting that. Our insurance costs per unit, so that takes every single unit on this community. Your apartment, the AL memory care apartments and our skilled nursing beds went up 13.3% per unit. Not in total, but just per unit. So your apartment. Utilities, thank God something went down. So our utilities went down year over year, and we do factor that in. We factor in if we are not spending as much as we were. Our property taxes on a per unit basis went up 19.5%, and that is our anticipated liability this year. Our hourly wages, so our entry fee employees, and these are the wages that flex, where staffing flexes up or flexes down, depending on how many residents we have, went up 6.1%. So that is actually, what you see is what our wage adjustment percentage was this year, 6.1% for our average hourly employee. And then we have fixed staff. So our fixed staff are that staff that they're not gonna flex whether or not we have people or not. Our maintenance staff, your management staff, the supervisors, your directors. We're gonna have them here, and it's a fixed cost. They went up 3.7%. So you can see where our focus is right now. It's on maintaining, recruiting, and retaining that hourly level associate. Our benefits for our employees went up 2.3%. And our other non-wage expenses, so that's your housekeeping, that's your plant maintenance, that's everything else rolled into one, went up about 24.2%. So if you look here, we have a weight, because not everything is worth 100%. Everything, if it goes up, does not impact us the same. So we weighted all of those increases to come up with our community inflation rate. And that community inflation rate, so the rate to operate one unit in Southport Square right now went up 10.2% from this time last year. Your rate increase is 6.6%, which means that the rate increases that we are charging is not dollar for dollar the inflationary and cost impacts that we're seeing year over year. That is also why we are taking the maximum rate increase that we can take. That being said, I figured there were going to be a lot of questions, so this is a relatively short and to the point presentation for you. And as I said, it's explained a little more in those handouts that you have in front of you. So at this point, I would like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
I'm here as an advocate for my mom who is a resident. What is the weight column?
The weight column weights it based on the percentage of the scope of expense that it is.
Okay.
So everything is not 100% down to the bottom line. Everything has a different impact, whether it goes up or down. So that's what that weight column does.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
How are the food costs allocated on the budget per person per day?
So the question is, how are the food costs allocated? So that is per person per day. So that means that on average, all of the people on Southport Square's premises We spend an average of $8.72 in raw food costs for the meal. Now, it's raw food costs, it's not server's cost, it's not dishes, it's not linens, it's truly raw food. And what you have to understand with Southport Square is we don't shop at Publix, so we don't pay the same food costs that you pay. We do get economy of scales because we do serve a higher population. And we also get rebates from our vendors. So we go with a vendor that has the most affordable, palatable pricing. On both of them, we do get rebates. So our dining team looks for quality as well as price and weighs the two. So if it's a lower price and a poorer quality, we don't buy it. But if it's equal quality and the same price and a lower price, we will go and buy it. So right now, we currently have 4 different vendors with which we source food. And we actually are in the process, I believe we changed our produce vendor to get more fresher produce than we were receiving before. And we're in the process of looking at a new seafood vendor as well for the same thing, because we want a fresher seafood. So we are constantly looking at vendors. Cisco is our main provider. I know we heard very loud and clear in 2020 that US Foods was not preferred, so we did go back to Cisco, but we also use Performance Food, we do use a steak company, and we just introduced a new fresh produce company. Yes?
Vicki, what tier food do we budget? Typically, it's a tier 1 through 4 or A through D.
We don't look at
We don't look at
tiers,
tiers?
no.
Okay.
I can tell you our average food cost about 5 years ago per resident per day was somewhere around $5. Once LCS took over, that actually increased overnight to get us closer to that $8 range. We are about average at that $8.72 to what the other Health Peak properties do. I lost a lot of sleep last night. Y'all are being really nice to me. In case you're wondering what I dreamt about. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions that are small in the context of everything you're doing. But I assume that insurance is not paying for any of the landscaping that's being done, is that correct?
So the question was, is insurance paying for any of the landscaping that is being done? The answer is no, sort of. So the insurance increase year over year is not. The insurance claim for Hurricane Ian is. And the insurance claim for Hurricane Ian is actually separated out from our insurance line. So when we have extraordinary losses like Hurricane Ian or the windstorm prior, we do not book those into our insurance line. They go to an extraordinary loss line. And we do not include the extraordinary loss line when we're looking at year-over-year changes in costs.
Okay. I understand also that you're getting a liquor license, which should lower the cost of liquor quite substantially. This should also produce some revenue. Is that accounted for here?
So that's actually not entirely true. We are getting a new liquor license. That is absolutely correct. Currently, you are right. We are buying retail liquor. However, because the liquor license, we do not have a liquor license because of some change in ownership and structure. LCS is currently reimbursing us outside of any extraordinary costs. So we're getting a dollar for dollar reimbursement for all of the liquor that we spend.
Thank you.
Would you care to go out on a limb and guess as to what's gonna happen next year? We've had extraordinary costs this year. Never happened.
I've given up trying to guess, and I'm telling you, this is why. We start budgeting in about 8 days. So July, oh, no, it's not July yet, I'm totally confused. We start budgeting in 11 days. So in 11 days, we have our budget kickoff. By Labor Day weekend, we will be completely finished with our budget preparation. Not finalization, but preparation, to go to our ownership. That being said, when we're looking at economic indicators and what the inflationary rates are going to be, I will start researching that in the next week. I have found in the last 2 years, they've never been more wrong. According to the first indicators that I looked at in 2021 for the 2022 budget, they expected the inflationary rates to be back to normal at the end of 2022. Fast forward to 2022, they expected the inflationary rates to be back to normal mid-2023. Still not back to normal, we're slowly getting there, but it's going down a lot slower than what they anticipated. So what we plan to budget, so we budgeted an 8.5%. That's what we rolled out at the beginning of January, because that is what we expected the CPI to be somewhere around 6.5%. It's lower than that, it's 4.6%. So odds are we'll probably wind up budgeting 6.6% next year unless there's any type of publications out there that strongly protest otherwise. So I can tell you that I do a lot of reading before we go to the budgets, because Brian hears my frustrations when they're like, well, what do you think it's gonna do? And I'm like, it says it right here. But I can tell you the last few years it's been completely wrong. So my guess is, and if I was a resident sitting here, assume the same until we tell you otherwise. Odds are it will go down, because the last 2 years we've seen a steady decline. By how much, I don't know.
Okay, did I hear you say a 19% increase in property taxes?
Yes.
What was the rationale of the county in such an increase?
I do not know what the rationale is with the county. I just know that that is our anticipated property tax bill. Honestly, our property taxes bills are paid out of our corporate office, so I don't look at the bill very closely. So I don't know why the county raised it 19.2. One of the things, just to add color, is I rent right now. I'm waiting for the interest rates to go down, but my rent last year went up 15%, and I'm looking at another 10 to 12% increase this year due to property taxes and insurance rates solely, because I pay for everything else.
Yeah, but property, you've got sizable increases in the cost of property that housing has just gone up, skyrocketed, and to tack on 19% on top of that makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't know what happened in the county commission meeting. That's unfortunately more information than I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanna make sure I understand who's paying the 6.6%, and if my contract says CPI plus 2%, is that identical to the 6.6, or is that 8.7?
So if your contract says CPI plus 2%, you'll be paying the 6.6%, yes. All right, well, if there are no further questions, I have been waved down from the back of the room to remind everybody that Brian Hess, after you got this wonderful information, will be in the dunk tank. And for $5, you too can dunk him. And if you can't hit the target for $10, you can just push the button.
Inflation next year will be $7.
Next year it'll be $7.50.
And all the proceeds go to the Employee Appreciation Fund.
Notice I'm not in there.